Yeah, it's
I think
probably
we're live.
true. And we are live, and this is my conscious pause to then transition to welcome all of you and say a very good evening. It's Friday
I'll give you
night.
company.
Bhavik and I are back. Uh, a short introduction, and then we cover the topic. Actually, the topic first. The topic today is Communication 101 in remote work. Uh, People on this not call but live session, Bhavik and me. Uh, a little bit about Bhavik. Bhavik is an engineer from IIT Madras. He did mechanical engineering. For the first couple of years, he was very, very excited about studies and got the best grades. In the last couple of years, he ran as far away from that as possible, but he could not extricate himself from the desire to perform academically. And so he landed up in this company called Boston Consulting Group, where he started his career as a management consultant. Worked across India for a couple of years, then transitioned to being very, very close, intimate, and very, very involved with Microsoft Excel in Bain Capital, which is one of the most flagship private equity funds in India. Spent many sleepless nights there working on financial models, portfolio companies, and the like. And now he's BU head at Scalar Academy, where he co-leads along with me and Vedant the entire business for growth and amazing career outcomes. So welcome, Bhavik. Great to have you. As usual, I will not be as kind to you during the rest of this conversation as I have been
Likewise, my
in the
friend.
last
Likewise.
in the last 80 seconds. With that warning now out of the way, a little bit about me for everyone who might or might not be interested. My name is Yash. Along with Bhavik, I also lead Scalar's business team. Uh, I am not an engineer, so a lot of you might be techies who are watching. I'm an arts graduate in economics from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. Like Bhavik, I also worked in management consulting in McKinsey and Company, first in the India office for a couple of years, and then in the New York office. Uh, Experienced, I would say, more than about 12, 13 different client situations, more than 15 cities easily. Got confused at most points in my career in consulting. Decided that I wanted to do something purposeful. Came back to India in 2020, joined Scalar Academy, and have now been tied to this rocket ship with a mission to make it grow and to make a lot of career transformations happen. So thank you so much for joining this session. Bhavik and me will cover a bunch of what I would call stupid point of views and stupid questions, which may add some value on the idea of communication in a remote work setting. So, Bhavik, just in the interest of putting you on the spot, and I know that
Hmm.
we've shared 3 or 4 questions with each other, but I also know that I'm not going to pick those. I'm going to pick the ones that I haven't shared with you. So just to put you in the spot, I will ask you the first question, then we'll go back and forth. And in
Uh-huh.
case there are any questions from folks, we can take those as well. Cool. So the
Shoot,
questions
I'm ready.
we've received from community are plenty, and I think the first one is uh, so Bhavik, how do you manage communication when when you're on a group call and it's unclear whether you're participating in it or running it, whether there's audio or video. Essentially, how do you manage communication in a very large group call where things may not be as clear as to what needs to happen?
Wow, that's a very, very broad question. Let's break it down a little bit. So you're in a group call. Understood that much. Are
Yeah.
you a leader or are you a listener? Which one do you want me to cover? And I'll ask you the other one.
Uh, I would say, what if you're the leader of the call, where you're running the call, and there are more
Mhm.
than 5 people, and you get people to an answer?
Got it. Got it. Understood. Perfect. I'll try to keep it simple. And would love to see people's reactions and comments if you've got further questions on this. But essentially, the work for a group call or a meeting, when you're leading the meeting, starts way before the meeting. It's not something you need to do in the meeting, not even in the 10 minutes before the meeting.
Hmm.
Typically, if I have a group call, I need to be very clear on what constitutes success from that call. What do I want coming out of this call? If you have that clarity, then everything needs to flow from that. So first I'll sit and think, what do I want to achieve from this call with the people in the room? That can be a variety of things, right? You can say, hey, I
Hmm.
want explicit sign off from everyone that we are all on the
Hmm.
same page. Pick, go ahead, run the show. Or it is a brainstorming call. I want everyone to engage and give me their ideas. That could be another agenda. Third type of agenda could be, I want to give feedback to people about something I've observed, lay out a problem statement for them so that they go and think about it after the call. So see, a group call can have many, many goals to it, right? Now, first thing is, highest level, figure out what your goal is from the group call. Then think through what are the points you want to cover to achieve that goal. Just simple list of points. Figure out whether you need any data for proving some of the points, whether you want to bring in some emotion into some of the points to land your message, because your objective is to achieve whatever you define as success. So that's number 2. Number 3 for me is block time for everyone in advance with the agenda. No one should come into that call unaware of what to expect. So if you're working with people who monitor their calendars strictly, put it there. If you don't think they do, go share it on Slack, email, whatever is the mode of communication in your meeting. All of this, mind you, still before the meeting. I've not even entered the meeting yet. But I'm setting up the ground for the meeting to be successful. Then once I enter the meeting, if it's clear to me that I have to lead it and I need to walk away with certain success, I will first walk in and repeat the agenda. Say it, put it into the chat box. If you're using Google Meet, there's a chat box on the side. Say it, put it in writing. Everyone on the same page, ask for contribution. Does anyone have any agenda point they want to add? Otherwise, we're going to stick to this. Now you've laid the context for everyone. After that, drive the conversation. If anyone veers off agenda, respectfully tell them, ye baad mein address karte hain, we will address this later. For now, we will stick to this agenda. During the meeting, especially for long group meetings or meetings with multiple people, keep taking pauses, asking the people, have they understood till now? Are they aligned on whatever was said till now? Keep circulating the summaries in the chat box on the side. No one should have an excuse later to not be aligned or even be confused, unintentionally or intentionally. After that's done, run the meeting, clarify everything. Meeting over, job not over. After the meeting, circulate those takeaways and to-dos very clearly. Again, Slack, email, whatever is useful for you. Why am I doing this long process? Because I want to achieve something out of the meeting. What happens if I don't? It screws things up big time, because you might put something into action, work really hard, and a week later someone's not aligned. Go redo the whole thing. Or you were relying on 2-3 other stakeholders to do something for you. They didn't realize that that was the expectation for them. Stuff breaks. You wasted your time, everyone else's time, org time, useless. So meetings are very powerful, or they can be weapons of mass destruction. You choose. That's my philosophy.
Got it. So you're trying to make sure you manage the pre-meeting process in a way such that you get enough done in the meeting. And then there are in-meeting hacks like constant check-in, alignment on chat, making sure people are responsive, and then ending with sign-off on next steps. So your mechanics ensure that your goal, if that was sign-off or inputs or decision, are reached. Got it. And I think very helpful.
A lot of these are simple things. It sounds simple, but what I've seen people make a mistake about it. These are habits. If you miss them 1 time, 2 times, you might not see as much damage, but it becomes a bad habit. You start missing these over time, and all it takes is 1 mistake for stuff to blow up. So building these habits is a tricky bit. Seems very innocuous, but very important.
Got it. Do you also want to talk about the famous pre-read? By famous, I mean not the entire world, but the 300, 400 folks of Scalar know the ritual that you instituted, after which there has been a significant transformation in our internal, company-wide meetings.
Well, I hope there has been. At least people are wary of that when it's a meeting with me, luckily. But sure, I can speak to that for a couple of minutes. I think there was this time back in November-ish where we all realized we were doing too many meetings and not getting enough out of them. I think it was something we were feeling, it was something the founders were feeling. In general, that was a sentiment. And I realized the problem lies in not doing these small things correctly, because all these small things together lead to success, right? So I think I created a document, which was the good meeting checklist, which laid out before meeting, during meeting, after meeting, what are the things to do. For people who are new to it, use this checklist, make sure you're doing it. If you do it, I promise you the meetings are going to run well. If they run well, you will automatically see your productivity improve. I don't know if the whole org has adopted it, but in our immediate vicinity, people seem to now be following that, right? Agenda, shared, takeaways shared, to-dos shared, clear accountability. Two more points, which actually are more as a absorber or a consumer of a meeting than someone driving it, which I would like you to speak about, because I know you religiously follow this, is the funda of obligation to think and obligation to dissent. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, see, I wasn't expecting you to flip a question so soon, but now that you have, I will remember it for the remainder of these 20 minutes because, the volleyball can go on and opportunities can be aplenty to put you in the spot. And that will be used by me. But before I answer the question, I think also would love to say hello to the folks who pinged us. I think Vishal, Sandesh, Pooja are in the session. So hello, thank you for joining. Uh, Pooja, if you want to know more about Scalar Academy, we can give a brief overview a bit later in the call. Uh, and we can definitely address your question after this, which is, going to office or working from home. Uh, Sandesh, Vishal, do let us know if there are any questions. So cool. The quick question here is obligation to think, obligation to dissent. Very specific, narrow question. Typically, if you want to put someone in the spot, learn from Bhavik, give them a very narrow question, then leave them hanging. Thanks, Bhavik. Uh, my what I would love to sort of give a view of is typically a meeting is a orchestration of people sharing their thoughts in the most basic way, right? It's in sync, not an async like on chat or Slack or email. And so what is important is that there is clarity on a common goal that one is solving for, which is what you laid out. So the leader will lay out for me or for 10 other people in that meeting that we're solving for sign off on a decision of whether to launch this product or not. And so for that, each participant may be representing a function. Maybe I'm representing business, somebody else is representing marketing, somebody else is representing sales. Each function has a certain obligation to respond affirmatively or otherwise on that decision in the meeting. So my mental model is that the moment I enter a meeting as a participant, if the agenda or the definition of success from that meeting is not clear, I will clarify like what do you want to get out of this meeting? And whoever that may be, right? It may be someone in our team, it may be product team, it may be tech team, it may be founder, it may be anyone. To ask them what is it that they want, because then you can help get to that objective that the meeting person has set. Within that, my belief is that typically, if there is a bias to speak or not speak, or a bias to voice a differing opinion or not, my default is I will give my point of view, even if it is not in agreement with the trending point of view, as long as I have some data, ideally also some logic and data, both to back that point of view. Uh, and the reason I think that's important is because there are very few times in a sync conversation where people's wavelengths in a thought process are going together. And if you spot something that nobody else has, which is a blocker or a problem or a potential fault in the future, then for the benefit of everyone, including yourself, I think the obligation, the prerogative one has, that I believe one should have, is to say, no, let's think about this. It doesn't make sense. Maybe we need to plug this gap. Uh, so my definition, my answer is always, it's a no or a doubt in my head unless proven otherwise. So I will strive to educate myself, absorb information, take active notes, try to interpret what you're saying in the meeting, make sure I'm convinced. And if I'm not, I will either ask you why and clarify, or if I'm convinced that I'm of a differing opinion, then I will come back and say, hey, I disagree for ABC. But I'd love to do it live. And the key hack there is a lot of people, I think, absorb the information in the meeting, walk away half agreed, and then the other person doesn't know that they've half agreed. 3 days later, they come back and say, oh, you know what? I don't fully understand this. I don't fully agree with this. Now, that's bad meeting participation. I think as a participant, the obligation is you engage and either actively say that I am agreed or I don't agree, or I need time. I will come back and tell you within one day. The part that most people don't do as participants, that I also did not do earlier, is I would not make these three states clear. Now, I think the hack to get this done is at the end, say, if you're not clear, say, I need time, we'll come back. So the other person knows. A non-decision clarity is better than a non-agreement, non-full agreement decision signed off that eventually changes again. So That's a little bit of how I would like to participate in meetings. But fun. Before going further into this theory, I think Pooja has the question. I think one of the folks who's very pleasantly called Chode Buddy also has a question around how work hours may have increased, system design questions. So cool. We'll take Pooja's question first, which is it's too simple for you, Bhavik, but I'm going to complexify it a little bit. Uh, do you miss going to office, or is work from home suitable? Uh, and with that, I would like you, Bhavik, to talk a little bit about what is the primary difference. There is the most annoying and the most delightful between office and home.
Yeah, I think I would anyway have to split it up into what do I love about it and what do I hate about it. Because honestly, my answer is it's a mixed bag. It was delightful till a point, and then it's become a mixed bag over time, right? So let me actually split it into that. What do I love about it? What do I hate about it? What I love about it is the flexibility it offers me to control my schedule. What am I doing? Where am I doing? When am I doing it? Right? If at the end of the day, all we're solving for is outcomes, I can very comfortably get up from my workstation, go outside to the balcony, listen to some music, sip some chai, take some time off for myself, gather my thoughts, come back. I have control over my time. Similarly, I have control of how and when I want to engage with people. No one can walk into my room and suddenly distract me when I'm in deep flow or thinking really deeply about some problem statement, right? Back in office days, people can take the liberty to do that. Sometimes it's productive, very often it's destructive. Usually it's entertaining. But that really destroys control, right? So work from home really solved that for me. Less distractions, more control over what I want to do when and where. Similarly, I don't like working at one place and working beyond a point in time. Nothing stops me from picking up my laptop, going and lying down on the couch for half an hour and then coming back. So that flexibility is lovely. The bad part to me is, and that's for me as a person, I love being around people because energy is something I like to vibe off. If you're in a room and you're brainstorming with people, problem solving with people, in the middle, everyone's tired, some banter going on, all of these things are things that energize me, whether it's banter, whether it's exchange of thoughts, whether it's exchange of ideas. That has something that's gone missing since a very long time. It's starting to poke me now. I like sitting around people. Do your own thing, I'll do my own thing. But in that middle, when you have a problem statement you quickly vibe on, or you have a common shared joke, that part has now gone missing. It's a bit hard to recreate in a digital setup. So I think those are the ups and downs for me.
Got it. So there's almost a shared experience of work versus a solo experience of work.
Yeah.
Solo is giving you more flexibility, but it also gives you a little bit of limitation on how much you can engage and vibe off of the energy of coworkers, whether that's an idea or a joke or anything of that sort.
Correct. So there's a spectrum, right? There's complete isolation and there's way too much intermingling. I like a balance. I want to choose when I'm doing my solo work. I want to choose when I want to engage with a group. It's not as simple, but if you're able to solve for that even in a physical workspace rather than working from home, I think it leads to more delight in life. I'm not someone who likes to stay cooped up and work all the time. I'm also not someone who likes to be distracted very frequently. So I think that's the balance for me. What about you? What do you miss about going to office?
Right. I mean, I'm trying to wonder if I really miss too much. My answer is that I don't miss a lot, other than instant access to people who I might want to jam with or do some problem solving with. Because my model is I prefer flow, and my flow tends to come in when there's less distracting noise or distracting someone coming in and saying hi when I'm in the middle of something. So I was usually, I mean, if you go back to, when I was in consulting at client side and McKinsey going to a client side, I was completely in disarray because you're sitting on a table with 5 people, some engagement manager, 3 associates, one guy is eating, another guy is taking some call. You are here, the AC stops working. Wi-Fi suddenly has some issue, and then you have to crank away and get to output within 12 hours because every day you have to deliver something useful. And I would find that deeply jarring, not because the work was extremely difficult, it was, but because the situation made it even more difficult. So what I would do is I would actually end up going to the conference room. I remember at a client site, which is not being used. All the lights are off. Nobody knows anyone is in the conference room. I have gone in with the lights off. My laptop light is on. I've spent 2 hours finishing my work. Then I go to the team room, and then somebody will take some chair, somebody will say something, and they'll take a call. I'll be like, okay, fine. I don't have to do focused work. So I prefer very clear option of going into dark mode, which I think is about 60 to 80% of my workday. For 20 to 40%, I can engage, but my engagement has to be by my consent, not because somebody came up to me and said, let's talk now for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think Chote Buddy also saying, I do miss the free food and fun time with people, particularly, for example, the TT table at our office in Scalar. Uh, but not too much that I miss actually.
Interesting. I think what's interesting is you're saying something similar of, hey, I like my flow time. I don't mind disruption, but my flow to disruption ratio is 80-20. I don't like the
Hmm.
50-50 that often workspaces offer.
Correct,
Interesting.
correct.
Very interesting.
I prefer the ability to choose dark mode. Not too many places allow that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Awesome. Let's move to the next question. There's one which I found in our community polling, which I was very tempted to throw at you, and I'm going to exercise that temptation right now, because I honestly think you're someone who does this very well, which is everyone has a different way of communicating ideas verbally, right? Everyone has a different speaking style, and there are a lot of nuances to this. I know you have broken this down into a framework of how does one become better at communicating with voice.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
how does one get better at verbal communication? Is my question to you.
Got it, got it, got it. But I think thumbs up to Chote Buddy and Pooja who have hopefully got some answers and opinions that may not be the best but helpful. Cool. So how does one communicate with voice? I think broadly, speed it up maybe. 2 minute answer. Uh, to me, essentially there's three parts in spoken communication. One is the message architecture itself. The second is the verbal communication, verbal vehicle of that message. And the third is the non-verbal vehicle of that message. Now, the mechanics of it are number two and number three. But non-verbal is, by some research, it tends to be more than 90%, almost 93% of what we communicate is non-verbal. For example, my eyebrows are frowning at you now. That's non-verbal vehicle of communicating the message architecture of complete and utter disappointment that this is what we are doing on Friday night. But there is also verbal vehicles where one can play with variables that are very obvious to the listener, but not often known to us consciously. And those are, any theater artist, any person who's a professional speaker or a vocalist would be able to say it. But at a high level, those are pitch, tone, pace, clarity, amplitude, and the ability to change pitch, which obviously varies between male females. The ability to go different in tone, the ability to play with pace, go really, really fast or slow it down so that someone can absorb, clarity of, words being interpreted and heard the exact way that you want them to be heard. And then amplitude, of course, right? You can go super loud, which I don't know if this mic will allow, or you can go really soft. All of those are important. Now, let me take an example of how this verbal vehicle, the non-verbal vehicle is a frown, for example, a verbal vehicle works. I remember very specifically, there's this one leader that I used to work with in my consulting life who used a very counterintuitive method of grabbing attention in a 10-12 person boardroom meeting. Instead of trying to be the loudest or the most vociferous in the room, this person would lean in and effectively be the softest, such that everybody would be forced to shut up and just zoom into their like chairs and be like, "What is this guy saying? It sounds like it's important. I can't understand it. Let me pay attention." And it was incredible. It's like a noisy room goes silent because one guy is speaking so softly and so persistently that people are feeling FOMO and they want to hear him, and so they've shut up. That hardly happens in an Indian meeting. So it was a unique way of using verbal vehicles consciously in terms of amplitude and pace to ensure the message lands well. So verbal is that, non-verbal is of course gesticulation, expression, etc. The message architecture, various ways of thinking about it. My top-down way that I look at it is I usually go back to have an equation in my mind, which is ultimately I'm solving for the message that I want the person to interpret. And then backwards, I will solve for the message that I want to deliver. And then backwards, I'll solve for the message that I'm intending. But I'm almost solving for what is this person going to walk away with in terms of the thought and in terms of the feeling. In fact, sometimes I go a little bit further and say thought is the cognitive element of it, feeling is the emotional element of it, and sensation is the physical element of it. For example, sometimes people feel like this energized, I am running towards my target kind of thing. So you want to have somebody with a message have the right sensation, the right feeling, the right cognition on it. And then you work backwards from it, craft it. I usually have 5 bullet points. After that, I riff with the room. And I believe that if you're practicing your verbal and non-verbal vehicles, point 2 and point 3 well enough, you can almost play an orchestra of, which tool when, amplitude when, pace when, pitch when, tone when, and of course a frown, which I will use again and again with you. So those are some
Interesting.
ways in which one can improve spoken communication to have impact. And that impact then translates into both how you're perceived and business needles that move.
Interesting. So you're saying, I'm going to dumb it down for myself. You're saying, firstly, there is architecture, which is what am I saying? Then there is verbal vehicle, which is how am I saying it? And then there is non-verbal vehicle, which is what am I doing while saying it? You're saying if you land those 3 things, what am I saying? How am I saying it? What am I doing while saying it? You can change the dynamic with anyone you're talking to. They will be able to understand you better. They will be able to walk away with what you want them to walk away with. And if you fix those 3 things, then it's golden. And the way to fix those 3 things you're saying is, what am I saying is something you need to plan or have a running answer for. And define this is what constitutes success. What are the 2-3 ways I can ensure that? How am I saying it is pitch, tone, pace, pronunciation, loudness, or softness. And then what am I doing while saying it could be hand movements, frown, sitting down, standing up, all of that. But that's your hack. How do you do all this simultaneously?
Simultaneously. I think the way to approach a communication point, whether that is one-on-one, two-on-one, many-on-one, one-on-many, whatever permutation combination, my approach is that this is not a conversation. Most of the time, when it's just one-on-one with small team with you, it's just communication. But otherwise, my approach is that this is me on stage. And I go back to start thinking of, hey, when I used to debate or when I used to act in college or in school, how would I use the entire facet of abilities of verbal, non-verbal, and cognition to land the message? And it almost becomes this multimodal, find all the tools you can to get the point across.
It's a performance.
So it's the mindset of being on stage as opposed to the mindset of, hey, I'm chatting with you. And you have to switch between the two, but it's situational.
It's a performance, and to deliver a good performance, you need preparation, and then you need to start having fun, I guess, is the broader point. And you enjoy doing it, I suspect.
Yeah. Great source of joy.
CH Code Buddy actually had an interesting point where he or she said, I find it difficult to explain sometimes because I want to use a whiteboard, but now we are so verbal communication oriented. I think there are 2 parts to that which I found interesting. One is, yes, earlier we used to have physical stuff we can use. Now it's just our face, our voice, and some chat on the side, which is an obvious challenge, and you need to up the game for communication. The other thing which this prompted for me, and I don't know if CH Code Buddy had this in mind or not, but I go back to my early days, and I faced this initially, where there were times people would come and ask me for an explanation, and I would fumble it, right? Which to me was a lack of preparation. And this I've observed in a lot of people early in their career, right? It's just, there are key moments when you have maybe some FaceTime with your manager or your boss, and out of the blue, there's a question thrown at you, and you fumble it. So what are your thoughts about fixing that? You have 10 minutes, 15 minutes with your boss, with your manager, and they've asked you for your views or an answer or an update. How do you make the most of that? Otherwise, especially in this digital era, a fumble goes bad. You can't really go to their room 5 minutes later and fix it. You're stuck. You'll have to set up another meeting. You'll have to send them a long Slack message.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. Essentially, the question, if I got it correctly, is how do you effectively communicate without fumbling in response to CH code and a few other messages on chat and
With the
community?
nuance of let's make it even more interesting. What are the most common fumbles which are horrible? It's when you're talking to your boss, right? So how do I quickly answer my boss out of the blue? What do you need to quickly answer your boss out of the blue?
Yeah. I would say the method that I have found, and I have fumbled a lot of times in the first few years, even now I often do. The method that I tend to find useful is by default. I think that communication is just the delivery. As long as the thought is organized in my mind, I can zoom out at any point in that thought. It'll take me 30 seconds. And then give the zoomed out version of that thought to the person. Typically, if a superior, a manager, a boss, a founder is asking something, that, hey, how is this campaign going on, lead gen or growth or anything of that sort, or product metrics. I don't want to tell them कि ये button अभी change हुआ, यहाँ पे this one thing has happened, the emailers have gone out. No. I broadly already have the thought architecture in my mind that while I'm working on this, not for the purpose of communication, while I'm working on this, I know that there is an overall campaign design, there is the entire messaging, there are flow metrics, and there are interdependencies and transfer of the leads to a certain system. And I will step back for 30 seconds, not say anything. If I'm working on the emailer, I will step back from the emailer to the mid-funnel engagement, to the entire reason why mid-funnel is important, to the campaign objective. And then those 30 seconds allow me to zoom out. And then when I start communicating, I've used up 30 seconds out of 5 minutes. But the four and a half minutes that I'll use with the superior, they will start from the top saying the objective is this. We have done this on the product, on the flow, on the messaging. Currently, emailer campaigns are going on. This is an interesting insight you should know, by the way. This is working well. Here is something that's not working well. And what I need from Ross, WhatsApp, email, and maybe website pop-ups. And if you have any other ideas that I have not seen. Because for me, the might always be there to do work well anyway. Communication is just one part of it. And if somebody is interrupting me to ask me something, the zoom out view, which will enable me to test my own thinking when I articulate it. Plus, it allows me from which I can gain value. So for me, it's an opportunity to get more. And that switch was fundamental in making me feel. I should think of it as somebody's asking me to update them on what I'm doing. Now I think of it as, they're asking for an update, which gives me an opportunity to ask them for help. Something that might help me deliver better. So there's two broad things. There's a thought architecture. Take a moment, deliver it, and then take it in the spirit of not giving an update because somebody's asking, but in the spirit of taking it as an opportunity to get more input and help.
You use that with, say, your bosses or your managers, whatever, as an opportunity. Have a running answer always, not because they're going to ask you, but it helps you organize your thoughts.
Yeah.
And then don't value add to it. Hey, what can you tell me in return that will add value to me? And then your bosses start seeing you differently. They see you as someone who's prepared, who's on top of things, in control, and who's intelligent. When they'll say, tell me something. I think that's very powerful. Very interesting.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to pick, Darshan has said that things are buffering. So commentary on the technology that we're using. StreamYard, please do better. If you're watching the admin, you need to make this tool better. But I think there's a question from Nitin, which is, what are the best communication hacks which can be used while negotiating something more spicy? I guess the question is, how a conversation where you have to negotiate something that is high stakes. It could be salary. It could be your KPI or KR for this quarter. How do you approach a sensitive, high stakes conversation where negotiation is important to get what you want?
Interesting question. Some negotiations still date cause some butterflies in the tummy. But I think let me share some of my hacky thoughts around this. I think before you step into a negotiation, as with everything else in life, you need to be prepared. But what do you need to be prepared with, right? The goal of a negotiation is they come with their requirements, you come with your requirements. It's a meeting. The first topic we started with in this call, in this video, right? It's a meeting. The meeting has some success. What is success from a negotiation? It is you get what you want, they get what they want ideally, and you land up on a common answer. No more confusion. A negotiation by default. Now you need to figure out what is give and what is take, right? Put yourself in their shoes, understand what do they want and why do they want. Make a list of things that they want. Take your guess on what are their must-haves, what are their good-to-haves, what can they maybe flex with. That they'll give for you, but the rest they will take from you. Then go back into your shoes, nice, comfy, and figure out what do I want out of this. Make a list. Okay, I want X, Y, Z. X is must-have, Y is good-to-have. Z I can use as a bargaining tool. That's fine. So that's your preparation going into a meeting. Second thing, before you go into a meeting, pump yourself up. Don't be flaky, right? Be very clear on this is what I want. And I'm going to stand my ground in a very reasonable manner. It might make you nervous, it might make you anxious, but that's very important. Otherwise, you might do all this preparation, you'll hear one counterpoint and you'll be like, oh no, this is an awkward moment. I don't want to go through this. It's a confrontation. Let me walk away. So don't do that. Calm down, get yourself pumped up, go into the meeting with a mindset that's a conversation amongst equals. It's not you being inferior, them being superior. It's not you demanding things that you don't deserve. If you fundamentally think that, then please take a step back and figure out why am I going into this negotiation. You can't go into a negotiation feeling that you're inferior. That's a battle lost already, right? So take a step back, understand what they want, understand what you want, figure out what are the gives and takes. Calm yourself down, understand why you're going into that. When you enter the meeting, you have these two lists. Assuming you're prepared well, you'll know what to give, what to take, figure out what is a common ground. If at the end of the negotiation, you feel like it's still not getting where you want it to get to, be shameless about saying, hey, I don't think this is landing where I would like. Maybe let's set up more time. Let me think through this and figure out if there's a way we both can flex. Go back with a solution to them next time. Start with a solution that, hey, I think this is a middle ground because you're getting XYZ, I'm getting XYZ. What do you think? So that's my mental model. I'm making it sound way easier than it is. Even my stomach churns today with some of these conversations. But I think these are the bare minimum you have to do. If you don't understand their psyche and your psyche, if you don't understand their must-haves and your must-haves, you're never going to be smart in a negotiation. Tell us your hacks, Yash. Tell us your hacks.
I agree with you. I think a big part of it is broadly those 2 or 3 elements, right? One is the preparation and an awareness of other versus self, negotiables, non-negotiables, just the preparation element of it. Then there is the hold, the calm, reasonable approach element of it. Then there is the find and exit clause if things are not going your way aspect of it. So I don't suppose that I have done too many negotiations where it's been very, very open-ended. Usually there is always a pre-decided element. But what I found is there are certain hacks that are a little bit more, I would say, there are a little bit more first principles in how people think and behave. It's beyond the preparation. So for example, there's a couple. One is called, a door in the face approach. Another is called a foot in the door approach. Now, what does that mean? Door in the face is, hey, Bhavik, should we go to Bali tomorrow for a nice vacation with, 5 other friends and spend a week? It'll be truly fantastic. You're going to be like, no, man, what is this nonsense? Are you mad? It's COVID. But then I'm like, okay, fine. Let's rent a car, go to Kunnur. You'll be like, okay, maybe. So if I directly asked you about Kunnur, you'd be like, no, man, it's COVID. What are you saying? But because you already exhausted your ability to say no, your natural reluctance is, yaar, vapas no nahi bolna. Let me just leave it a little bit soft. So you exhaust somebody's desire to say no by giving them an absolutely obviously unreasonable request. And they'll slam the door in your face. When you knock on that door again, most likely they're going to be like, fine, maybe I'll consider it. So door in the face is classic, right? It's used all over the world. It's time immemorial. From the art
Yeah.
of war to psychology 101. Another one is foot in the door. Foot in the door is when you basically, you're not going to get too much. You want to go to America or something with your family, and, people should all plan the ticket and lots of money has to be spent. And, it's not going to happen. So there, the approach is you just seed the idea a little bit again and again. It's an ongoing negotiation saying, oh, look at this. NBA is so nice. Oh, by the way, why don't we do this? And so you nudge a little bit of a foot in the door where you give some examples that prevent the door from being shut. You leave the possibility of the America trip open, and then you find a fertile point to hit the home run. So there are different ways that you can orchestrate beyond just the preparation, beyond being calm, beyond ending it with optionality, which is you play on basic heuristics and mental models of people. One of them being, of course, door in the face, because people don't like saying no too many times. Nobody likes saying no. Nobody likes it. It's the fundamental reason why B2C sales works, because you can only say no so many times. And, nobody wants to close a possibility. If you've kept it open, it may grow in their mind. It's also inception to some extent, but foot in the door is much more basic than that. So I'm saying there's the dark arts that can be used, and there is, of course, the basic preparation 101 vanilla,
I think this is that
but
really
effective
interesting.
approach.
This is that interesting bit between preparation and the actual meeting, where either you seed the idea, or you set up well so that you get what you want, which also now makes me wary of responding to requests from you, because now I'm going to always watch out. Hey, he's asking me something which is very idiotic. Aha, I know something more reasonable is going to follow. I know what Yash is doing.
So, I mean, the effectiveness of the approach is the lack of the other person being able to fully see it. I would say my model is that I try not to use any of this, but it is a last resort mechanism. Where there is no hope and there is no reason the person can't understand, do a door in the face, do a foot in the door, do one of these. These are dark arts on the side. In an ideal world, one shouldn't have to do this if your relationship is strong enough. So I'm sure you will go Bali, because anyway, you're excited.
Kunur it is.
Kunur. So Yogesh has a question which I think is quite fantastic. Nitin, hopefully that answers a little bit of what you had in your mind. Please let us know. Yogesh's question is, how do you remove inferiority complex issues along with imposter syndrome? This is perhaps the most common early career feeling ever. Across sector, across industry, across college, you may be the topper of your college, and trust me, I know you will still feel it if you're in a situation where you enter. So this is common. What have you done, Bhavik, to try to cope with it? Have you found hacks that you or friends or others have worked with so that this imposter syndrome is not a inhibiting factor?
Wow, that's a heavy one, man, and it's one I can relate to, honestly. Yogesh, you're not the only one. Everyone faces this. No one realizes everyone else is facing this. I've faced this. Even till date, I continue to do it at times. There is always there are moments of weakness when you're feeling like, am I the imposter in this room? Is everyone else smarter and I'm the stupidest person? And I'm going to be very honest with you. I haven't cracked this one completely. I think there are a few hacks. There are a few systemic long-term things one can do. But this is a very, very heavy subject. It's one that goes right to psychology. It's one where therapists make their money. Bread and butter of therapists is by solving this amongst all young adults in India and abroad. And India especially so, for various reasons. I mean, look, in the short term, there are some hacky ways. One is acknowledge why you're feeling that. A lot of times it's under preparation. So try to solve that. A lot of times it is glorifying the person opposite you, where they seem perfect. And we don't put ourselves in their shoes enough, or we don't know them intimately enough to understand that, hey, they are human too. They have their struggles, they have their problems. We always assume the other person is glorious and we are the biggest idiots. So trying to take a step back and unpack the other person's life. What does their day look like? What does their week look like? Change the conversation to from they're perfect and I'm better than me. There are some things I may be doing better than them. let me learn, let me not glorify them. Right? That's step number 2. One very hacky way, which a lot of people say they follow, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it still works at times, is faking it till you make it. But fake it till you make it is a very common exercise, where you keep putting yourself in that spot and feeling like you belong. These are all hacks, I think. To be honest, a lot of imposter from our childhood, how we grew up, how we saw ourselves, how we think the world sees us. Every day more about them than they actually do. Everyone thinks that the other person is thinking about how I am behaving or looking right now, whereas the other person's actually not thinking about you. You are not the center of their world. They are the center of their world. They're thinking the same thing about themselves. So a lot of imposter syndrome comes from childhood, comes from how we've grown up. And honestly, the systemic, a lot of introspection, being honest with yourself and unpacking help. You go talk to a therapist, hey, this is what happened in your childhood. And this is what's affecting you till date, right? And you have so many aha moments. You identify, hey, this happened to you. Since then, you behave like this. And you're like, you have to change that, right? So there are a few hacks. I personally believe you need a systemic solution. And luckily, it's way more affordable, 50 rupees, 500 rupees than it used to be earlier. It is way more accessible. It's no longer about me having to find to Juhu and figure out a clinic where I can sit down and be comfortable with someone. Now it's virtual. You can talk to, etc. So affordable willingness to go and treat it like any normal. That's my view on it. I know I think, Yash, you're closer to this because you've studied psychology. What's your view on this one?
Yeah, this is a more expert opinion, like Bhavik said, but the layman answer, because I'm not studied it as one of the electives in my undergrad, and again a theoretical psychology answer. This is my preference that I have found useful. Is broadly the thesis of imposter is what? Is to say that I am here probably undeserving and maybe I don't deserve to be here or in this room or in this situation or in this setting. So it is by default, there is an implicit bar of judgment on this is what is required to be here versus this is where I am. So there are two lines that are drawn in your mind. Feelings come after that. Inferiority, unhappiness, anxiety. But there are two lines. Line of what is needed and line of where I am. Most of the time, both lines are a function of absolutely misidentified and garbage hand-me-down perceptions. They are not original thoughts built bottom-up. They are inherited ways of thinking and perceiving the world. By inherited, I mean because people are from a certain standard to be in, let's say, a consulting McKinsey environment here, and I don't feel like I'm being able to match that kind of communication, maybe I'm not good enough. So there is a bar that you perceive, and there is a self bar, and then you see the difference. And then I feel like, oh my God, I'm an imposter. I shouldn't be here. So my model is very simple. Therapy and all that is great. I think I would highly recommend it. But there is a mode of unpacking why that bar is. Why is that line here supposed to be? Why am I seeing myself here? And then most importantly, accepting that there is no such thing as, necessarily a standard for everything. Which is an important switch I had to make from being a student to a professional, because you are by definition in the Indian system, I think it's a mistake of our system, is you are by definition as a student for way too many pointless things. Why do you need a unit test every 2 weeks? What is this nonsense? It's complete garbage. Evaluation. This evaluation flows into personal life and then professional life as well. To the extent possible, if you're lucky or if you're getting help, you can get to do that, and that solves most of the root issue to me. So remove evaluation, improvement, go to it, and then run with it. So broadly, that requires more expert opinion. So we may not be qualified. Yeah. Hopefully, Yogesh, that gives you some views to the question a couple of times now, rephrasing it. So we'll take the latest phrasing for you, Bhavik. It's interesting you're getting these questions now. I think it's also a little bit of work from home. Stress. How do you cope with judgmental environments? And how do you respond to it while being cautious always? And this is again something that, it can happen at home, it can happen at work, it can happen in college, it can happen in hostel. A judgmental environment exists, you can't change it. It's our system to a large extent. So the question is, how do you respond and cope with it?
Got it. Understood. Honestly, this is a bit of a situation to situation answer, right? Because judgmental environments can vary in types. There is a situation where there's a power dynamic. You feel like your manager, your boss, or superiors at work are the ones creating that judgmental environment. Every move of yours is being analyzed, evaluated. Every time you say something, the other person is forming a judgment which will flow into some outcomes for you. That's one type of judgmental, where there's a power dynamic in place. Second type of judgmental, and there might be many more, I'm telling you two which I have seen or experienced. The second type of judgmental is a bit of what we spoke about earlier, right? Which is where you feel like your peers are constantly evaluating you, and you start perceiving yourself as being tested. Am I as good as them? Am I worthy of conversations there? That's another type of judgmental, right? So there's lateral and there's top down, like from your superiors. I think each of those are handled a bit differently. And I think what Spandana you're asking is, how do you manage to thrive in such a situation? How much do you share? How do you figure that out? That's what at least I'm taking away from the question. If I'm wrong, do my answer. I'll try to take a crack at the first one, which is, hey, if I'm in an environment where my managers engage with me in a setup where I feel like I'm constantly being evaluated, how do I deal with it? Because most probably I'm going to start feeling anxious. I'm going to start feeling nervous. And the more anxious and the more nervous I feel, I'm going to fumble. I'm not going to be able to show them my true potential. So that's the problem statement I'm going to try to answer now. Spandana, again, add in the comment if that's a different question to what you're asking. I can redo my thinking. But on this one, where it's a top-down, where you feel like people are always judging you top-down and you want to put your best foot forward, but you feel under pressure. I'm going to start sounding like a repetitive record. But whenever I used to feel that, I realized 60-80% of the times, it was because I did not believe I was prepared sufficiently to have that conversation. And that was 60 to 80% of the time. That has a separate fix. I'll come to the remaining 20 to 40 in a bit. But for that 60 to 80% of the time, what I realized was I had to switch to always having a running answer, to always being on top of things. And especially when you're younger in your career, when you're an individual contributor, an IC, you tend to go deep into your problem statement, into the data you're looking at, into the code you're writing, into the presentation you're making. And that's a job. You're an individual contributor. You're going to do a lot of tactical things. What individual contributors frequently miss out on is taking a step back periodically. And honestly, it's not always their fault, right? As individual contributors, we have tough deadlines. We have a lot of work to complete. So you will crank out output. What you will have to solve for over time is, as you get better, as you get more productive, whatever time you save, make sure you're taking a step back. It's okay if your answer instead of 100% is 80%, but use that 20% of the time to step back and understand, what am I doing? What is it solving for? How does it fit into the worldview of my manager? Because you are working at 0 feet. They are operating at 100 feet. Whenever you engage with them, you can't engage with them at 0 feet. They will start getting annoyed because they're not getting the answer they want to get, right? And that's when they create that environment where they are doing, this is not right. What are you saying? This doesn't make sense. I didn't ask you that, blah, blah, blah. And then you start perceiving that as, hey, they're judging me poorly. They're constantly judging me. So first is change that exchange of information. Take a step back, understand your work from their perspective, so that when they engage with you, you give them an answer that they understand at 100 feet. And then you go down to 0 feet wherever required. You will start noticing that their reaction to your answer starts changing. Instead of, this is not right, it goes into, that makes sense, and they're engaging with you more. That is my personal experience, where you will start suddenly realizing that, hey, the environment wasn't as judgmental. It was just a wavelength mismatch. And I perceived them as always being unhappy with me. I have now fixed it because I'm starting with the answer they want to hear, or the shape in which they want to hear it. And then I'm giving them whatever my message is. And to do that, you need to take out time. So that's very tactically speaking, from my personal experience. Again, might not hold for everyone. My personal experience, a lot of time, environments that I perceived to be judgmental were just a wavelength mismatch. That's 60% of the time what used to happen to me. Right? 40% of the time, maybe it's genuinely judgmental and they're treating you in a certain way. You don't like the way they're talking to you, or the tone in which they're talking to you, or the type of questions they're throwing at you. You don't feel they're justified, right? There's only so much you can prepare in advance. Honestly, after a point, you have to have a very frank conversation with them where you tell them, look, your objective is XYZ. My objective is ABC. This is how you can make me successful. Part of that is I respond to certain ways of talking and communicating better. Please, let's set up a cadence between us, a style of communication between us. Because when you ask me questions in this manner, it throws me off. It's making me inefficient in communicating with you. I also lose, you also lose. It's a lose-lose. Let's make it a win-win. What people don't realize, especially again as individual contributors, is it is all right to have that conversation with your boss and tell them, boss, this is how you can make me successful. And me successful is you successful. So it is okay to go and demand from them a tweak in their style. You don't have to accept their style of communication. You can demand that, hey, this is not working for me. It's making me unproductive. Please change your style of communicating. It will solve for your problem. It will solve for my problem. I've rarely seen people do that, especially in Indian workspaces, right? We feel obligated to adapt whatever is our manager style. We don't give them feedback and demand a change in style, which we think can solve for outcome. So for me personally, those were the 60-40 places where I thought it was judgmental, but I realized that I need to put myself in their shoes and solve for their answer. Their tone and mannerism and behavior with me changes. 40% was where it was genuinely unproductive, judgmental, tone was not right. You have to go have a frank conversation. Otherwise, you'll be in that frying pan for the next 2 years and there'll be no way out of it. So that's my very personal experience. Yash, what judgmental environments have you encountered? How have you tackled them?
No, I fully agree with your approach, which is you've got to. I mean, Spandana, great question. First of all, I think
beautiful question.
Broadly, the thing that takes a while for me to understand. It took me a while to understand. It takes, I think, a lot of early career folks, just like me, some while to understand, is that the manager's job is to make you successful, and it's almost like if you're able to lay out for the manager that this is how I respond well, ask me questions at this time, let me be for a couple of hours, don't ask me every 30 minutes because then I'm not able to focus. I promise you the output will come. This is the best way to bring out output out of me. That user how to work with me user manual, that is the way that I think works. To be honest, it doesn't always, because often there are environments that you can't change. So there's only so much you can do. I would say the algorithm is, hey, either minimize exposure to that environment to the extent possible. That could mean taking more walks, getting more air, taking more chai breaks, finding another manager, changing your company if it's consistently making you feel that way. While, of course, changing the environment is not always possible, while you're in that, try to make it a win-win, like Bhavik said, with the user manual of, hey, here's what you need to do to make me work well. Because implicitly you should know, whoever your manager is, whatever your function in, your manager's job is to make you successful. And if you forget that, then there is a challenge. So if you don't forget that, you'll probably use it. But I think we're at the end, Bhavik. We should wrap up. Maybe one last question for you, which has come up from, thank you so much, Spandana, for your question, which has come up
Hope that
from,
helps, Spandana.
so Yogesh has another question, and maybe that's the last question, which is again an existential one. So good way to end Friday. Should anyone be following social norms in terms of communicating or being yourself? Oh, by the way, Nitin has a question. Nitin is asking if Scalar will launch a psychology program for engineers. Nitin, that is possible. If you find a few hundred engineers who are excited to learn Psych 101, I'm sure we can cobble something up together. I have personally found that a lot of engineers would love to understand more about mindsets, behavior, user nudges, because the tools engineers build are used by humans at the end of the day. Today, maybe 10 years later, some AI will use them. And so today it's important to understand behavior and all of that. So would love to, organize something like that. The only constraint is, Nathan, we have a lot of topics lined up that people have already asked. So if you have anywhere around, 50 to 100 people that are excited about the session, drop me a line on LinkedIn. We can figure something out. But back to you, Bhavik, last question of the evening. And for everyone else, if you have a final question you'd like to ask, please let us know. We can do that. Otherwise, this is the last question. So, should anyone be following societal norms, or be yourself? Will people be jealous and prevent opportunities? So, it's essentially a question of how authentic should you be in the way you are and in the way you communicate without damaging yourself. Yogesh, I hope that's the sentiment of your question.
Interesting. This is a question which will have very different answers from very different personalities. I can again share my personal view on it, but that's just how I perceive communication. Let me split it up into two parts, right? And again, this might resonate with some people, might be problematic to some people. I'm open to hearing counterpoints to this in the comments, but my view is I usually differentiate my spaces. There is my professional space, there's my personal space. For me, in my professional space, communication, more often than not, 60-70% of the time, tends to be a tool for me to get my job done. I have something I'm solving for. The way I communicate is solving for me to get my job done, for my organization to get the job done. And hence, if there are 100 people I'm interacting with daily, I tweak my communication style to each one of them so that when I'm talking to them, they are vibing with me, I'm vibing with them, we are understanding each other, and we're getting the job done. So in my professional space, I personally see communication as a tool where if I believe that what I'm doing daily is something worth my time and it is an objective I really want to achieve, then a key part of that is getting people on board with me, having the same shared understanding and getting the job done. In my personal space, with my friends, with my family, etc., I think communication starts becoming not just a tool, but often also a way of expressing my identity. There, I can play around with it a bit more, because while it is solving even now for some outcomes, I might want to get something from my friend. I might want to make my mom feel a certain way. So it is still solving for an outcome. There I can start being more artistic, more creative. What helps there is we also choose who we surround ourselves with, right? I choose my friend circle. I choose my family circle. I choose who I am interfacing with and with what objective. If, for example, Yash and I are hanging out on a Saturday night, we have the objective of maybe having some fun through some content, through some poetry, through a debate, through some intellectual back and forth. Their communication style is a way of expressing myself. In my professional space, my communication style is to solve for a particular objective. And that's how I personally like to separate it. I know a lot of people who believe that communication for them is so internal that they want to express themselves everywhere, and that's personal choice. For me, I think it doesn't fit into my mental model as much. Of course, if a workspace demands a complete shift in communication style, which I am uncomfortable with, I know it's not going to help me deliver outcome, and that's not the right space for me. So obviously, it needs to allow me to play. My professional space needs to allow me to play, but my point of playing is to getting the job done and whatever helps me vibe with people. So that's how I split it, right? There's personal space, professional space. Professional space, I'm solving for outcomes. I'm solving for great relationships. So I will tweak my communication to my audience. In my personal space, I will choose who I engage with, how I engage with, and it can be getting the job done. It can be my artistic expression. So that's essentially how I see it. Yash, your turn.
Now you've drawn the issue tree. If only we were doing this session on an iPad, we could have actually. And by the way, we'd love to, on the comments, you can tell us. We can make these live sessions actually very problem solving oriented. We generally do problem solving with DS Algo for Business, which is, hey, let's break the problem down. Let's identify the variables. If you notice, Bhavik's, the way he communicated was actually a tree structure. So if you want some of that, we can modify the style and do some of that. We don't know if you want it, so we've not done it yet. Short answer, Yogesh, I think the logic, I fully agree with Bhavik. The feeling that I would like to leave you with, in the spirit of the World Test Championship between India and New Zealand, is that whether you're a Rishabh Pant or a Sehwag or anyone else, right? There is no one size fits all answer in how you express yourself. It's mathematically, there's something called the no free lunch theorem, where you can't take one solution of hey, I am always going to be super energetic and very, very loud in all situations. You have a style. Your style may not need to, you don't need to become Rahul Dravid if you're Rishabh Pant, but Rishabh Pant also needs a defense and an attack. He can't be attacked all the time. So within your authentic style, you should have a range. It's not a binary of, hey, do I be my authentic self or do I adapt to the situation, be someone else? No, 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 no. That's stupid. You got to be your authentic self and develop a range of authentic selves as per situations. And that is how, you can be your own self within norms. Because I mean, I can be authentic, go down on the road now and dance. But the point is that at the end of the day, if I maintain certain broad parameters of my own authenticity, it allows me to get more done at work and in life. So it's not a binary. It's a situational play with a range of authenticity. A defense from Rishabh Pant is very different from a defense from Rahul Dravid, but both are defending because the situation demands it. If the situation demands it, do it.
Lovely cricket analogy. This is
Yeah, I'm
actually
just
very relevant to this time. Topical answer. Uh, Essentially, what you're saying is, look, be yourself, but don't be rigid about it. If your self is 100, give yourself a band to operate, 80 to 120, and use different styles for different people. So if you're Rishabh Pant, have a defense, have an offense. You're still Rishabh Pant. You're not behaving like that. Have a defense, have an offense. So understand what you're good at. Everyone has a style they're good at, but then be flexible enough to play around with it. I think is what you're saying, right, Yash?
correct. For example, if you notice, Yogesh, in this answer, Bhavik's style was he drew the issue tree in his mind, the data structure, put the answer personal professional. He broke it up again. And then he gave you that, and then he zoomed out, zoomed in, and then gave you example, and then zoomed it again and paused and passed it back to me. I said, great, issue tree is made. I will take a metaphor first approach. What topic comes to mind? Cricket. It's relevant. Let me take a metaphor that might vibe with you. So there was a conscious style where my natural instinct may have been, I wanted to make that issue tree. But I said, is that the best answer we can give you? No. Issue tree is already drawn. Let me give the metaphor and analogy. So you have the imagery and you have the logic to think through this. So adapting to the situation. While I would like to do that, I chose a different path. Similarly, you should. But no, I think, Amit, glad that you like the session, Stefan. Clearly, we know you, so you're going to be nice to us and say that you love it when I'm sure you don't. Uh, Marina, I think, has a great point that if you're fighting against natural reactions, it's obviously not the greatest space to be in a workspace, and you got to set boundaries. I do know that we have end, Bhavik, but I think one question is there from Anshul, which does
Mm-hmm.
merit a key point. So it's a personal question, but I do think we're in that time where we're being very authentic in this convo to the extent possible. So I guess the question is, why do I feel like slaves in a team sometimes do whatever's told, leave the activities? Is that normal? And this is perhaps a sentiment that few people have the courage to admit, but I suspect a lot of us at work have felt at one point or the other. So the feeling here is, why do I feel like one cog in the wheel being told to do something? Is that normal in a workplace? Do you think that's normal, Bhavik? And maybe it
No,
is,
no,
maybe it
you've
isn't.
you've
But
been
if
you've been smartly making me the first responder, and then you nicely come and say you are going first this time. Yash, is this normal?
well, I bought 3 seconds with those three wells. It's not going to help me still. uh, my default is that again, this is slightly controversial, but my default is that most times there are workplaces that are essentially of two kinds. One, that think of the output of the work, the product or the profit or the revenue, as the only goal with no other goal. That's the 20th century workplace that is not built on making the most out of their people. So it's just output. Everyone else can do their part in it. It doesn't matter. The other workplace is where output is one goal, but non-output is also a key component of the goal of the workplace, because they see a symbiotic relationship between the non-immediately output kind of aspects, such as not the product shipped, not the revenue, but also the happiness alignment of the people. So I fundamentally believe that there are both of these. My honest opinion is a large percentage of workspaces are even today more the former, right? They'll just care about the output, which is revenue, आया, output, आया, etc. आया, बाकी गया, okay, doesn't matter. Uh, but there is, if that number was 90, 95, 98%, much, 30, 40, 50 years ago, uh, it's probably moving towards a more holistic workplace. And the mental model that one must have for this is the following. But before I answer with the mental model, Anshul, the question is that normal? No, it's not. It's not normal in terms of, hey, is this how work should be? But if you ask me, is this common? I would say perhaps yes. So it's common, but it's not normal. And so over time, as workplaces become better, it will become less common and less perceived as normal. But yes, it is prevalent now of the limited world that I have seen. Uh, the way to ensure, if you're a manager or if you're even a managee, one way to ensure that things don't go in this fashion where there is just a feeling of, I'll do what you tell me to do, is that you have to solve for the team a cycle. And that cycle has to have three components. There has to be a constant loop of alignment, execution, and renewal. What bad workplaces do is they just align कि ये target है, जाओ इतना बेच के आओ, right? And then there will be execution where there isn't much support. You go execute to figure it out. And then again, they'll get a new target aligned and new execution, new target and new execution. Good workplaces, however, pause between the alignment and the execution, like an F1 car race. Take a pit stop, do a renewal. A renewal is like a refueling of your energy. It could be a skill upgrade, it could be an office retreat, it could be a dinner with your team, it could be a motivation session with your manager. This is where you renew, you regroup yourself. And then you align again for the next goal, and then you execute. So you will always, in a fast growth private sector environment, you will always execute to deliver on goals. Almost, majority of people that I worked with in my life or seen, forget that the renewal needs to happen. The best managers and the best employees solve for that renewal. And so when you look back and think of, hey, this manager I absolutely loved working with, you will 90%, I'm sure, be able to go back and say, this person had a rhythm. And that rhythm included renewal aspects, where they would align, execute, renew, align, execute, renew. So that cycle is important. To answer your question, Anshul, that's the cycle to have. You can educate your manager on it as well. It's common. It's not what normal should be. And hopefully it won't be later. But I do admit that I have seen it a plenty. So Bhavik, now that you got extra time to think and smile and nod at me, the ball is in your court.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I'm gonna mirror the last answer, right? So you've set out the context, the logic behind it. I completely agree with the logic, right? To me, if it's quite common, I don't think it's normal. It shouldn't be the norm. And if it is there, it is typically the fault of the manager. I think that is a failure of a manager in organizing their team. That is essentially your one job, which is make everyone run towards a common goal in a way that they grow and they're happy. Because teams which are happy and growing will get better and better and better. Teams that are not happy and or not growing will get worse and split up, right? So it's the failure of a manager if their team members are feeling like slaves. And feeling like slaves can have multiple emotions to it, right? It could be my view doesn't matter. It could be the manager doesn't empathize with me, etc. Now, let me give an example of hacks around it, right? Let me go anecdotal this time, the way Yash usually does. I think one insight which I've seen a past manager that I had do really well is to ensure that we as a team were not feeling like slaves or just robots running in one direction. The manager solved for one thing, one of many things. Of course, a lot of things which feed into you feeling like a slave, but one of the things they solved for was predictability. The reality of our business as consultants back in the day was that there will be tough weeks. There will be times when we will have to stretch on a weekend, sprint hard, and we won't have a choice because the client needs a certain outcome. And I'm sure it's like that in the IT industry too, right? Especially in the services world. What the manager realized was, hey, for my team, I can't solve for the fact that the business needs you to be working some weekends. What is the next best thing I can do? They realized that our unhappiness was not with the fact that we were working on the weekend every time. It was from the fact that we did not know we had to do it until the last moment. There was unpredictability. So the manager said that what I will solve for, to the best of my abilities, is that by Thursday evening, Friday morning, I will tell you how much time I need you to push this weekend and why. I will help you understand the context, and I will give you visibility. so that, yes, you might not be the happiest that you had to work on the weekend, but you also didn't land up in the spot where you had plans and you had to cancel them, which was unhappiness, felt not heard. I will also solve for the fact that you have context as to why this is happening. I will be honest with you because I am in the same team as you, so that you don't feel like, I don't know why I'm doing this, they're making me do random stuff, this is all for the client, yada, yada, yada. So an example of how a manager solved this well was understanding why was the team getting a bit unhappy, being honest about it, being honest with us that, guys, there's so much I can control, but look, I care for you, and these are the things I can control, and I will do my level best to fix that. So that's just a story about how, even in tough spots, a manager can solve for maybe not the perfect answer where you're happy, but they can solve for the slightly less than perfect answer where you understand, you feel like they're listening to you and solving for you. That's just an example of what, to me, an example is of being a good manager versus a bad manager.
It's not the quantum of work. Often it's not the quantum. It's the way in which you're managed. So awesome. I think we can. Oh, okay. Spandana has been very attentive to. I think, okay, if the last question is also there, might as well take it. So Spandana is a great question, which is, what questions should we ask exactly on show, right? Empathy is important. It's not the quantum of work. It's how they bring the work out of you and how they make you feel. If the manager is not doing that well, then to be honest, they're not doing the job they're meant to do. Manager is supposed to make the managee successful. Spandana, what questions can we ask during managerial round to get a wholesome idea about the team and the workplace? That is a fantastic question because this is so ambiguous. Almost no one cracks it. After you join the job, you realize, oh, aisa hai. Oh, should have known before. Both good and bad things. So have you found any litmus test questions that, Bhavik, have helped you grasp imperfectly but in sufficient detail culture in a management or a behavioral round before you actually say yes to them and they say yes to you in a job?
Yeah. I have a list somewhere, but I won't go through that whole list right now. I'll try to keep it short. And let me first take a step back and say, what are we trying to solve for, right? You're trying to understand what kind of a culture you're going into. And the most practical way to do that is, at least to me, I want to, at the minimum, understand two things. What will my day look like? And what will certain extreme situations look like? If I understand a regular day or a regular week well, and I understand that the company or the management's way of dealing with extreme situations, that gives me some more comfort about understanding what sort of a culture I'm getting into. Now, the key here, the prerequisite here is, I've realized over time talking to different people that people often forget that an interview is not just their evaluation of you, it's also your evaluation of them. And if you don't land the second part, then you're going in blind, where you're going to get surprised later, hopefully for the positive, often for the negative. So especially in things like managerial rounds or HR rounds, it is okay to put the interviewer on the spot, like how Yash frequently puts me on the spot, and ask them certain provocative, broad questions, right? Some of my preferred ones to at least warm them up and have a broader conversation are, what does a regular day look like? Make it real for me. If you had to talk about a typical week, what is it going to feel like? Who am I going to engage with on what? That's where you get nuances of how many times are you going to be interacting with me? Who all are going to be interacting with me? What is the nature of those conversations? What does my usual week look like, right? Yash's favorite construct is VILO, which is week in the life of. I want to know week in the life of Bhavik in this job before I go into that job, right? So that's one basic question you must ask. And it is normal to ask that. It is a must to ask that. The second thing which I like to usually throw at people, especially senior folks who I'm engaging with, founders, CEOs, etc., is, people talk about, hey, these are my values, this is how we like to run things, this is my culture. I ask them to make it very real for me. Tell me 4 situations in the past where this was tested. Tell me a few situations where this worked well and you exhibited that culture in your decision making. Tell me 2-3 situations where it did not work well and in hindsight, you should have dealt with it differently. What that does is it really puts them on the spot. People will usually fumble, get nervous. Secondly, you're forcing them to think back, and you're also testing if these are thoughtful people. Are they really thinking about their day-to-day? Are they thinking about how they want to run the company, the culture, the team? And they have to give you very real examples. When I hear people talk about culture and philosophies and all that, that's all well and good, man. Give me a real example. Tell me when that worked well. Tell me when that didn't work well. Tell me a story. And I found this makes people uncomfortable, but some of the answers I've received have been very helpful in me deciding whether I want to join a particular rocket ship or not. And they've been honest answers, luckily. And that's how it should be. If you feel like people are evasive on this question, that's a bad sign. And I'll also tell you what to do then. If people are evasive around this question or give you very high-level questions that you don't understand, ask these same questions not to the person taking a managerial round. Try to find current or ex-employees of that company. They are the right people to ask these questions to. So one forum is sure, raise it in the managerial round. But if you don't feel like people are well prepared, responsive, that's a yellow flag. Go test this out with people who are in the company or have been in that company before. So that's my hacky way. There's a longer list, but I don't think we have the time to go through that detailed list. But few nuggets which I think are the bare minimum and helpful. You don't want to be taking an uninformed decision. You want to know what life is there, what are the extremes, and what is steady state. Those two things are very important to understand. Yash, you've had ample time. Tell us your awesome answer.
Under pressure, but I will attempt to end the Friday. And I don't know. Positive, but thank you. But yeah, I think broadly very, very similar to what you laid out, Bhavik. But just two hacks. One is a philosophy that I have tended to believe. This is not about work per se. This is about transitions in life. A work transition is one subset of a transition. You change a flat. Like Bhavik and I are now searching for a flat. The process that I would use to identify whether the flat is the right flat for us to get is the same in principle, philosophy. The same process that I would use to evaluate if a company is the right company for me. Because what am I evaluating? I'm evaluating my fit with respect to a certain space, a workspace, a life space, choosing a friend, choosing who to date, all of that, right? I'm evaluating fit. That's the idea. Now, evaluating fit at the very heart of it has to be the equivalent of a motion picture, a movie, which is to say that there are 25 situations: happy situation, sad situation, overworked situation, underworked situation, taking off, bereavement leave, work offsite, problem solving with founder, many situations. How well do you fit all the situations in that particular workplace? That's the problem I'm trying to solve through this holistic, wholesome idea that you talk about, Spandana. Unfortunately, in a conversation, you cannot get a movie. A bad conversation answer is when somebody will give you how's the culture? We are a very collaborative workplace. Yada, 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 right? That's the party line. What you need to do is between this headline of the movie, the trailer of the movie, which is not even a trailer, it's a description before the trailer, and the actual movie, you need to try to get a sense of 2 or 3 levels of examples, so that even if you don't have the motion picture at 24 frames per second, you have 3 frames of paintings in your mind. Okay, how does a typical Monday look? What happens time by time? How does a typical week during the closing of the financial year look? How does a week during product launch look? How does a week during an average time look? The more specific you make the painting, more number of frames of the painting that you can get, the closer you will get to the movie. The closer you get to the movie, the more you're able to see if this movie is the movie that you want to act in or not. So that's the philosophy. Specific questions come on the spot, but what I have found is the general algorithm is ask a broad question of feeling that, how does this look on a day-to-day or a week-on-week or something? Put a situation, and then somebody will give you a party line, which is quite boring and pathetic. Then you ask one why. Okay, can you tell me one example and exactly how this works? Okay, Monday is crowded. Okay, what happens in the team huddle? Okay, typically, like, what is the kind of flavor? Can you show me? People get offended. They don't give you answers. That's a fantastic sign to know that it's not a wholesome place to be in. But again, step back. Philosophy is many questions you can ask. Ultimately, the goal is to know the movie, so you know whether to act or not. The more paintings you can get, the better. To get to paintings, don't satisfy yourself with the first answer. Ask two levels to it. Tell me more, say more, give me an example. Most likely you'll get to a better enough answer. And hold your ground. It is very, very difficult to sometimes ask the damn follow-up. Somebody says, some HR says something about, oh my God, this is a collaborative work, this is offsite. It's tough to then ask the follow-up. But no, ask the follow-up. I say, what happens in the offsite? Tell me the first day schedule. They may not like you, but you have to have the courage to ask that. And unless you're very offensive in the request, it's not an unfair request. They may say they don't answer. They're like, you move on, ask the next question. So that's about the painting frames, FPS, movie philosophy. But the idea is the same as what Bhavik laid out, which is essentially you want to get to specific situations and clarity to the extent possible. And there's a running list that you can make specific to yourself. You should almost always have that. We use that for our flat hunt. It's a 77-point checklist that Bhavik has refused to use now. But it does come in handy when he accepts that, yes, it may have some value. Hopefully that helps you, Spandana. Let us know if that gave you some clarity.
Interesting. We seem to have come to the last of our questions shared by the audience. This was one of our, at least for me personally, I thought this was one of our more interesting sessions. We got a few questions that were bouncers and beamers that we had to suddenly fend off and think. It made us think a lot, which is awesome for us. Thanks a lot for people who dialed in and made us think and made us be authentic and genuine with you. It was a lot of fun for both Yash and me, I'm sure. And yeah, if you enjoy this kind of authentic answers, which are not so much about the technical work that we do daily, but more about how to philosophically think about work, how to deal with different situations, tune in every Friday night. We will try to be here every Friday night. Next week, you can see me put Yash on the spot more often than he did today to me. I will definitely.
Ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen. I got my guard covered.
I'm going to surprise you a lot more next week.
No, but exciting. Thank you so much, guys, for the questions. If you want topics that are even more funky, work banter, anything frank. See, our bias is to give as much clarity and frankness as possible with the limited knowledge that we have. We're keeping it vanilla-like communication because that's what folks said they want to hear. Hear something more spicy. Give us those topics. Comment on our Scalar LinkedIn, on our YouTube, and we'll try to do our best to bring situations that are very real to help you become the best professional and the best engineer you can be.
And let's do one experiment maybe. If you guys want that, if folks want that, we can maybe next time try to even bring in a little iPad and try to do some problem solving live with everyone on the call. Because that's sort of Yash and my bread and butter, right? Every day we see problems, we try to break them down and then abstract it to some philosophical answer, ideally. So let us know what topics you want us to talk about. Let us know if you're interested in doing some live problem solving with us. We can try that out next time.
Awesome. And now we would let you hopefully return to your lives and can return to our lives so that our work-life balance does not become the topic for the next one where we crib all day. So fantastic and wonderful. Thanks for the smile, Bhavik. We'll be on the spot again next time. Bye-bye,
I'm throwing it back at you next time. See you, everyone. Thanks for dialing in.
It's not a call, but it's bye.
I keep forgetting that. Too much work from home, man.